Just the other day, the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms presented its report to the President, and the President said, Hindu Meleta, implement it forthwith. We've had a conversation about this with the President's education advisor, and one of the major things that has been proposed here is reforming the funding in our universities and tertiary institutions, and also how we manage those institutions. Our next guest is the CEO of the Universities Fund, Mr. Geoffrey Monari. Good morning.
Good morning, Latif.
Welcome to Kenya's biggest conversation, the hot seat of the Situation Room again.
Thank you.
Karibu. This one is an interesting conversation that we're going to have. But to welcome you to the conversation, CT, oh no, it's me. I will give you the day's proverb.
Well done.
Today's proverb, Arnold says we should have had a proverb that is actually a Kenyan proverb to commemorate 9th of August 2022. And I've told him next year, 9th of August 2024, he'll come with a Kenyan proverb. Today's proverb is from West Africa, the countries of Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali. Unlucky or bad things come to one's mother. Lucky or good things will also come to her. Bad things come to one's mother. Good things will also come to her. What's your interpretation of this?
You see, a mother takes all issues. Clearly, mothers are known to absorb a lot of things, whether good or bad, and they'll always remain our mothers. So the proverb illustrates the importance of a mother to everyone, and to just remind us that our mothers will always be there, whether it's good times or bad times. Yes, they will never go away.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think it's a whole basket of, goodies and baddies.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what it is. That you have good times, you have bad times, indeed. And you have to cover it and show face. Whether it's good, whether it's bad.
Whether it's good or bad.
Yeah, it'll come. Hey, and that's another one, hey? That it'll come. The good times will come.
And the bad
just
times.
as assuredly, the bad times will come. But you carry them all.
Cool. Monari, there's a lot that's happened. The report by the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms talks about very many things, particularly in the post-secondary school education. First of all, for people who are new to this country, please introduce them to the Universities Fund, and then we'll talk about what then will happen to the Universities Fund according to these recommendations. What currently is the Universities Fund?
Yes, the Universities Fund was established by the Universities Act 2012. And its mandate is to apportion funds to universities, also ensure that there is a criteria of funding all these universities that we have. It is also expected to create a minimum differentiated unit costs for universities. The other responsibility is to one of the mandates is to develop a minimum differentiated remuneration for academic staff for universities, and lastly to advise the Cabinet Secretary on matters funding of universities in Kenya. Yes,
there have been challenges on funding universities, even with all the recommendations, the work that you've been doing so far, especially when it comes to the differentiated unit costs. The recommendation was that for every particular course in the university, 80% shall be funded by the government and 20% shall come out of pocket or from other sources by the student. But you've not hit 80%.
Yeah, that's true. This situation became worse over the years because the highest government has funded is 66%. That is in the year 2018-19. And as the number of students grew, the amount reduced to last financial year, we were at 48% instead of the 80%. And the students were also expected to fund themselves or through help 20%. However, the other challenge there also was that since 1989, the fees that was being charged by universities remained the same. So for 34 years, the universities were using the same amount to provide education in the universities. So those two issues have actually been the biggest challenge. And this year, according to our statistics, we were going to reduce to 34%. So something urgent had to be done. Otherwise, the quality of education in Kenya was going to suffer. And the students themselves would eventually be the ones to suffer, including the universities, because many had already been declared insolvent. We have seen vice chancellors being jailed in this country. Many lecturers don't even have pension as we speak. The universities have accumulated debts upwards 60 billion as at end of last month.
So then, with what we've seen today, Geoffrey, so what is the proposed solution that seems to have everybody in crosshairs at the moment?
Well, there are many solutions. It depends how we are looking at it. If we start from the most current, I know what the talk of town, we have changed the funding formula. And this is to ensure that our universities and the students get quality education. This change of formula was proposed to the Presidential Working Party when it went around the 47 counties so that they could be able to give a solution to the challenges our universities are facing and the quality of education that our students have been having from the universities. So it was proposed that we have 4 new categories of funding. That is, we fund students based on their vulnerable students. They'll be able to go to university and get a 82% scholarship from government, 18% loan from government, and they will not pay any amount of money. The second proposal is to have the extremely needy students get a scholarship of 70% and a loan of 30%. The third category...
And no out of pocket.
They get out of pocket. All these categories get out of pocket. The usual. The first category will get 44,000.
No, they don't pay anything out of
nothing
pocket.
comes out of
Yes,
their
they
pocket.
don't. But however, remember they'll get upkeep also in terms of loans. So they will not pay anything from their pocket. Those two categories. The third category will get a scholarship of 40%. A loan of 40%, scholarship of 53%, and they will pay out of pocket 7%. The last category will pay a scholarship of will get a scholarship of 38% and a loan of 55% and pay 7% out of pocket. So from the 20%, you can see the out of pocket has changed from 20% to 7%.
Yeah.
This has ensured that we now start having a new funding model that will be able to support our students. Yes.
But this 7% that you say is out of pocket.
Yes.
It's basically out of pocket is loan plus direct out of pocket, isn't it?
Yes.
Even in the differentiated unit cost, when you talked about 80-20, that 20% included help.
Yes, it included help.
So, okay.
Yes.
So now out of pocket moves from 20% to, in the highest case, 62%.
Yes.
Okay.
But
And in the lowest case, the
this
most vulnerable person will now pay 18% out of pocket.
Yes.
Okay. Now justify.
And this is, sorry, the pay that you will pay for all of this essentially is after your education comes to an end.
Yes.
Just to be sure of what we're saying here, that your loan that you get, even if you're at this 18% for a loan for the person in the most needed category, that it is when your university education is completed, that is when you begin to pay
To repay the loan.
repay the loan.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
But for the wealthiest, let's call them the wealthiest. What's that category? What's
The less
the
needy.
terminology?
less needy.
The less needy.
Yes.
The less needy will pay 7% upfront
Yes.
to get to university.
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry,
And
there's
that
a question
is-
you're going to answer. Sorry,
Yes.
can I just be sure? this expense, what are we talking about that this 7% will then cover? Because it must be allocated to something. Is it food? Is it tuition? Is it housing? What is it? Or is it random?
No, it is allocated to tuition.
Okay. It's
they will also get a loan of 24,000, which will be for their upkeep, to use for food and other requirements in the university.
Okay.
Yes. So what we are saying, this new model has actually reversed how previously we were funding, because the most vulnerable then used to get a loan of up to 60,000 from HELB. Now we are giving them 18% of the loan, which is less than they were previously getting. What is the reasoning about this is because we have realized that when somebody is vulnerable, even after you finish your studies, chances are very high that there's a lot of dependency from family and friends in the village. And like somebody who is less needy or probably capable, chances are that their family will be able to take care of. And this group of less needy, most of these are students who you see in our universities who drive to school, students who over the weekend carry their clothes to take home so that they are washed and come back on Monday. These are students who are in high-class schools. So the government is giving them some support and they can be able to pay. What we are bringing in is what we call equity. Previously, we were funding students based on equality, which meant that all of them were being given a grant, whether you like it or not, from the university's fund. And that meant that even if your family household is able to pay, then the grant is uniform depending on the program that you are attending. But what we are saying now is equity. We are funding you based on your level of need.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, actually, this question, you almost went ahead and preempted it. That's what I wanted to ask, because the devil is normally in details.
Yes.
But now, in defining, how do we come up with the metrics that then define all of those categories? Because I've seen actually a claim going around that we are now discriminating. The new model discriminates against people who didn't go to public schools. I remember a few friends of mine in a group saying that they are going to advise their friends to take back their children to public primary schools. Which, of course, in my argument, and I actually think it makes sense, that we cannot have scholars being philosophers, not because they really love to be philosophers, but because we are paying them badly. And getting a lot of them, sometimes we've looked at scholars, and especially lecturers, looking shabby, looking like CT. Well, he's away, so I can actually say that. The hair, now that CT is away, we can hate on him.
Yes.
Not because it's a style or it's the academic way of looking, but because we pay the staff around there badly, and that the universities have accumulated debt for a very long time. One of those things that your department will really need to do very well is to do proper policy advocacy and policy communication to ensure that the political, for people in the practice of politics, it's easy to twist these things. So they are running around and no one is really seeing the real reason around why this actually is changing. So probably if you were just to take us through how you qualify each and every one of those categories. Of course, that is being paired up with the issue around school selection, especially for high schools, that people from private schools, normally, even if they pass, you've seen that debate for hours. So it's being likened. So probably just to straighten on each of those categories and some of the metrics that will actually inform that.
Yes. Just to highlight, and I think one of being in a private school is one of the parameters, but it is not the eventual parameter, because you can be in a private school, but you are needy. You are needy. Somebody would have sponsored you.
Yes.
So we are looking at 4 critical areas. Number one, family economic background. That is the poverty probability index, from where you come from, and we are going all the way to the wards in this country. Probability index. That means that if you come from, let's say, Naivasha, or Kiambu, somewhere like Lari, we want to see from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics how well endowed are people from that area. That is one factor. Number 2, there is affirmative action. We are looking at people living with disabilities, orphans and marginalized. Those are some of the things we are looking at. If you went to schools in that area, it could be a public or private school, because we know there are many students in private schools, and these schools are in slums in this country. If you go to Kibera, Mathare, so it doesn't mean that it is a private school that will determine. There is a socio-demographic data, that is family size and marital status in the family. Are you from a divorced family? Are you from a single parent family? Are you from a family that is together? That also is a factor. And lastly is the family income and expenditure. If you are many children in school, then that is also a factor, especially if they're in university. If you have 2-3 children in university, then the income is also divided based on that. We are also looking at to validate this information through various agencies like KRA, NHIF, because we are aware to the fact that anything can be put on paper, but validation is what will be key for us. So we are making sure that we validate all
that you
this
get the right data,
yes,
and the right information.
It can never be 100%, but we are saying it can be maybe 98 to 99%.
So your margin of error is 2%.
Yes. Further, we are looking at, were you sponsored? We have gone all the way to Elimu scholarships. We are looking at the students who are given
bursaries by CDF.
CDF is you see, CDF, I don't want to go political, but CDF, what happens is that many people give all the students who apply equal amount of money.
Yes.
And that is the principle of equality where we are coming from. Because if I'm an MP and I get 20 applications and I have set aside 5 million, we shall divide that money equally to everyone. Because you want to satisfy everyone. What we are saying is that equity is what is important. So CDF may not entirely qualify, but what we'll use CDF for is we are going into a situation where we want everyone who is funding a student in the university to declare that to the fund, the 3 agencies that are working on this, so that you are aware that this student has gotten support from CDF, so that we can reduce their burden by reducing the loan, not the scholarship, the loan, so that in future they don't pay so much money.
Okay, so 2 questions here, Geoffrey.
Yes.
First one being, is this then, what we are looking at, this new funding model, a guarantee for every student who will apply to and be accepted to and attend a public university in Kenya, that this funding model will then apply depending on the category that you fall into?
Yes, we do guarantee, because already the budget has allocated funds. There was an increment of 20 billion to Higher Education Loans Board.
Yes.
The university's fund has been allocated 15.9 billion for this model, and this has already gone through the finance bill for this year.
Okay.
So this is money we can be able to guarantee. Further, those are the ones in public universities.
Yes.
Students who have chosen to go to private universities will get a loan so that they can support their studies.
No
they will
scholarship.
Not get a scholarship, but they are guaranteed to get a loan.
Okay.
So all these students, we guarantee that they will be able to get this, but based on the categories that they shall force. Yes.
So based on the information that they then provide, and whether this is an application stage or later on, they will then be told of their status, or they automatically fall into, so you'll be aware of what your status is, or do you know what your status is then based on, okay, well, you can then apply for 30% loan, and you will immediately know that you fall into the needy category? Or will you then be communicated to and said, look, based on the information that you give us, we've assessed, and this is the category that you are in, and then based on that, we then are able to offer you 82% scholarship and 18% loan? Is that what we are saying? How will they be then aware of where they fall?
We have created a new portal that is www.hef.co.ke, where the application process will begin. Once the students apply, in that portal we have created two separate. There's a student portal and institutional portal. So each institution will be given rights to check their students, so that when the students report, they can be able to know how much they have been awarded in terms of scholarship and loan, and how much they will be able to pay from their out of pocket if they are expected to pay.
Okay.
So what will happen, and again the students will download a letter from the portal which they'll carry with them to the university. The aim of this is two-pronged, so that the institution can confirm validity of that letter. Because we all know this is Kenya. You can carry a letter and then later somebody will ask, will say this is not the exact status. So what the institutions will be doing is to confirm that this is the actual award from the direct access in the institutional portal, and then they will admit the student. If you are not expected to pay anything, then you walk into the institution without paying anything, and then that bill will come to us to offset,
to pay
directly to the
You'll tell us whether this universities fund will remain universities fund or whether it will be now called higher education funds. Okay, you'll tell us what happens to your institution going forward. We are talking about funding the universities according to the new model that has been proposed, and the president has said, let's adopt this. This is the proposal by the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms, funding higher education institutions. Well, how we go into university and how we pay school fees in university is going to be different soon. And these are the four categories. So the most vulnerable in the society will get government scholarship of 82%. Then they'll be able to get a university loan of 18%. They will not pay anything out of pocket in terms of fees. The next category is the extremely needy category. They will get government scholarship 70%, get loans that they will repay after university 30%. When they are in university, they will not pay a shilling out of pocket. The next category will pay something out of pocket while they're in university, 7% of their school fees out of pocket. They will get access to 40% of loan, which will they repay after university, and 53% government scholarship. The less needy, that's the fourth category, 38% government scholarship, 55% access to loan, 7% to pay off pocket. Our guest this morning is the man who will be implementing this, the CEO of the Universities Fund, Geoffrey Monari. He's hosted by Eric Latif Nduoko, and our guest host today, Arnold Maliba, who's here, is a public policy analyst. Arnold, your question.
I have got two, so I'll start with what Ndu was speaking about. But still talking about when you're trying to administer equity, the challenge has always been that it becomes a little bit, coming up with a tool becomes quite complex. And already that looks too complex when you are breaking down the details. My question is that sometimes fortunes do change. We are human beings. Is that model, have you considered having a window that could actually review the metrics in case fortunes change? Because I've come to university. I had all parents who were working and everything else. I went to private schools. So then do I stop midway? Things change midway. So I really wanted us to actually have that in mind. If just in case the circumstances change, is it dynamic enough, or it's going to be quite rigid? You know, the problem with public sector tools is that they can be very rigid. Sometimes where you are asking somebody, show me where your grandfather was buried, for IDs, for example.
Yes.
And that kid has grown up in the city, he cannot tell a difference of trees and whatever. So just if the model is dynamic enough to factor in changes. But this one, the second one is a little bit of this 60 billion of debt, university debt. It's still bearing down on the universities. I don't know. I know in decision making it could be something that goes up to the cabinet. But knowing that Kenya produces a little bit of the region's best human resource, in the region the best resource that we have is actually human beings. Probably one of these fine days when you get the year of the PS or the CS, might you consider actually just floating that to bail out these universities if we do not have money with us? I know 60 billion shillings on the budget is quite a difficult amount to set aside. Probably float a bond specifically to take care of that, we will pay. We are good in, we will pay in forms of taxes eventually.
Yes.
Put out that and bail out universities so that then we can actually safeguard the quality of education. Otherwise, 60 billion shillings on the universities, those budgets are not normally so big, but universities are HR intensive. They've got so many people. So I still feel that even if we got this funding model on the student side, works well, but then at the institutional level, we still need to think about to come up with innovative and creative ways. And I was just thinking about floating a bond. So we can actually do a university's bond.
Yeah.
We will pay in future. We are a nation that works. Sisi ni watu wa kazi.
We keep kicking the ball, the can down the road. Yeah. But very good suggestions on the issue of when circumstances change. We actually have an appeal mechanism to review any loan and scholarship award that is given based on change of circumstances. We believe that circumstances do change for the better or worse, but most of the time the worse is what is reported. So we will be able to ensure that, especially when that happens, students do not drop out. We will make it as simple as possible. And we appreciate that fact that circumstances do change. When we go to the debt, and this is a very serious matter because, as I said, 60 billion is a lot of money. The challenge has been, do you bail universities out with 60 billion with a bond? It's a good proposal, but you must first of all plug in the holes. Because if you bail out university 60 billion today, 5 years later
there will be a wash with cash for 2 years.
Yes, and then maybe you'll ask another bailout. So part of the reforms that we are looking at is we are asking universities to come up with income generating agencies, and that is part of the reforms, and it is going to ensure that they are more sustainable. Secondly, we are looking at them looking at sustainable energy. One of the biggest debts that they have, in fact, if you go to some of the universities, they are provided for students to cook using the coils. You find universities with huge electricity bills. So sustainable energy, and there are people who are willing to support these universities, is very key. And that sustainable energy may even support them by universities selling it out to the community around them. So those are some of the reforms that we are looking at to change, so that even if we are to go for the bond, what we are looking at is sustainability after we float a bond to clear this debt. But if you look at this model, it brings in an extra 20 billion direct to the universities. So the challenge is to the various universities, how do you manage these funds? The CS and the president are very clear that moving forward, the universities have to be more accountable, so that unlike when there was Model 2, so that these funds are used to start clearing some of these debts, and ensure that reforms are put in place, so that in future we do not go back to where we are. It will create autonomy for the universities, so that universities become more dependable on themselves.
Okay. I mean, that was a question. I mean, I have bucket loads of issues in terms of own source funding for universities, regardless of whether they are public institutions or not. And the question was there an understanding somewhere that because there was government support, that these public universities are not allowed to think about ways in which they can bring in their own funding? Is there an unspoken rule somewhere that says because the backbone of support is from government, that you cannot think about ways in which to bring in more funding for yourselves? Is there something like that?
No. There are various ways in which they are being pushed by government to bring in funding, because we are requesting them to commercialize their research. What is actually happening is that our universities for long have been doing a lot of research, but moving them to commercialization because of sometimes bureaucracies it becomes a problem. So those are some of the areas. Innovation hubs, working with industry,
absolutely,
so that they can be able to be more self-sustaining. If you go to Germany, for example, the Volkswagen that we see on the roads here, there are universities that are linked. There's a specific university that is linked, and it's the one that does research, and then they produce a car, they improve the car every year. The returns that the company gets goes direct to the university. That university is a government university, but doesn't need any money from the German government. So for us, there are many, being an agricultural country, and the way we churn out a lot of raw materials, how can we be able to add value to these raw materials? And it's not that we don't have the brains are there. What is lacking is that industry linkage, so that it can be moved towards manufacturing.
Could it be something deliberate? And I mean, these are suggestions, even as we have these conversations. Could it not be something deliberate? Even if it's to say that, look, we know that government is trying to do many things. We've talked about Ajira. The majority of the people today who are doing this online work fall in this category of university students, for example. It could be used as a model. Joro Campus was agricultural rock star for the longest time until things began to fizzle out. And here we are talking about a government who is, harping on agriculture today. I think there are very many linkages that can be made, but perhaps, again, it's that devil of implementation that sits on the shoulder oftentimes and says, well, can we just not do this thing? So I guess there are many suggestions, and one would hope that even as you're having these conversations, that it becomes an implementation as opposed to a floating of ideas. Before this new funding model, which, if I look at one of the proposals, was the amalgamation of the Tertiary Education Placement and Funding Bill to put together HELP, UFB, and the TVET Fund, right?
Yes.
All as one. What happens to folks who... And HELP is a yearly application, was a yearly application. You apply and then you move forward. It didn't give you your full 4 years or full 5 years at once if you applied. So with this new funding model, what happens to people who had taken a HELP loan before and finished that year and are now getting into this new category? Do you forgive their loan? And then we move forward.
Clean slate.
Yeah, start again.
No, there is no forgiveness for now. What is happening? This new funding model only applies to the KCSE class of 2022.
It's important to note.
It's important to note that the rest will continue with the DUC, which we had, because we realized that if you try and mix this, first of all, the amount that will be required will be too high. The government may not be able to support this effectively. So you start with a clean slate. What we have also done is to ensure that universities do not increase any fees. There was a cap that has been put to ensure that...
The one of 1989 stays.
No. The current one, which they quoted, and when the students were applying for placement through COOPS, you could see the costs of the program there. The 1989 was not the actual cost of the program. It was cost sharing then. Yeah. The model then moved from fully government sponsorship to cost sharing. And that is how 1989 changed, because before 1989 the government used to take care of all costs. But as the numbers grew, it became a challenge, and that is where we have reached today. If you look at the numbers for this financial year, 2022 KCSE class that got C plus and above were 173,127. That is a huge number to fully sponsor them, and hence the request and proposal for them to apply for loans so that they can support the system, and we create a revolving fund for future generations to use.
Geoffrey, there's also a huge number, in the hundreds of thousands, of KCSE graduates, let me call them KCSE graduates, from 2022, who for one reason or another are not in this 173,000 that you speak of.
Yes.
For they did not know how to fill the CUSP's placement, they could not afford the 1,500 shillings registration, so they're not in this pool. Maybe in the future, they get into the pool, and the budget is already set for this 173,000, and they may be in need. What happens to them?
Future means if it is after this financial year, then they'll be considered in the next financing cycle. That is what will happen. So because for this financial year, we have, as you rightly say, there are some who did not apply, but that number had already been factored in.
Okay.
So unless they don't apply, and you cannot keep money as per the government budgeting cycle, you cannot keep that same money for the next financial year. So we'll have to consider them in the next financing cycle. And we know that not all students who get C+ and above, remember there are many students, as we were waiting, who went out of the country because they can afford it. There are many students who went to private universities. There are many students who went to public universities but private courses because they wanted a certain course. They did not want to wait for placement. So that gap always allows us to bring in students who can be supported. Yes.
Still coming back to universities funding themselves and what you said, sustainability in own source revenue and managing their finances. Is there going to be a restriction on what universities can or cannot do to raise their own money? We saw what happened to the universities. They went on a land buying and building buying spree, right? And then they ended up with all these assets that are just not making any commercial sense. The examples that you've given, if it is programs that are academia related, then it would make sense. But if you open it up, Kenyan universities are now going to start becoming land buying companies and doing everything else that's being done just so that they can, and their justification is Monari told us to find our own raise our own money.
Yes.
Private universities in this country are not doing that. We don't see them buying buildings left, right and center. Look at them, Daystar, USIU, Baraton, Maxwell. How are they raising their money? How are they able to sustain themselves over all these years? And what can we do to make sure that our public universities are also not running amok, buying hotels in the middle of town?
I think we have learnt the hard way.
Have we?
Yes.
Okay.
My engagements with the vice chancellors, that was a period when, as you rightly say, the planning and all the issues that went into it was not carefully thought about. So universities are now carefully ensuring. Remember, the ministry closed many campuses that were there to curb some of this wastage. The ministry also went further to ensure that these universities have to get approvals for any purchases going forward. So those guidelines are being implemented. Why we are encouraging for them to go for the IGAs is to become more autonomous and provide quality education in the universities. Because when you have got idle assets and you're not sweating that asset, it's also a loss to the university and the country. What that will mean is that as we move forward, we will also ask the universities, as we look at the balance sheets, can they support these students instead of all this money coming from the exchequer? And that is the model we are looking at, and that is a model that is out there, because you find a certain percentage of the support of these scholarships. You're all aware there are universities out there that you find 30% of their students are on scholarship. And if we can reach a situation where instead of investing in buildings, we invest back in the quality of education, that is the model we are looking at. Because we believe that most of these universities, especially the older ones, have got enough facilities. The challenge will be with the younger universities that still require support in terms of infrastructure, hostels, and all these things. In terms of hostels, we are also encouraging universities to go for PPPs. And out of the PPPs, mainly go for buy, operate, and transfer later, so that the universities do not use their infrastructure funds for those hostels, because there are private investors out here who can be able to support these universities. For private universities, I think, and that's what the public ones are suffering from. Many of the public universities that were promoted to become universities inherited staff how they were previously. For example, if you are a technical or a polytechnic, you had staff who were there, and you inherited staff who you have got now and the wage bill is so high, you cannot get rid of them unless you get some support from the government. So you maintain staff who you don't actually require. That is not the case with private universities. They come in very lean, and they ensure that their expenditures are controlled. So as a sector, we are moving to ensure that those reforms are implemented, so that in future it will not be easy, but in future we can have universities that have got staff that are required and are well paid. The point my brother brought out, where you find a lecturer is not able to take care of their basic
own beard.
needs. Yes. And many other basic amenities. And the most painful is even when a lecturer retires and there is no pension. You can imagine, if you retire, there is no pension, you have worked up to 70 years, because that's when they retire, then it becomes a problem. As a country, we should be very worried about the situation we are in. Yes.
I think, Eric, also, to just build on that and then ask a question, is that when you talk about private universities, they actually charge courses at market rate. That in and of itself ensures that they remain afloat for quite a while. Secondly, he spoke about them being lean and effective. Anything public somehow is huge and slow, in that it takes a lot of time to reduce, or rather take decisions and work around that. When he spoke about universities having their own, and he gave the example of power, I think you had in mind Strathmore University, which is one of the leading green energy providers. And if you look at Kenya Power's list of
suppliers
suppliers in the grid, Strathmore University is there. But you see, the challenge here, even as he mentioned that we are an agricultural country, we really are not an agricultural country. It's true that 33% of our GDP is contributed by agriculture, but largely that is subsistence farming. When I was in school, 16% of our land was arable. Today, the people at the Ministry of Agriculture are saying that we only have got 8% because we've used those funny fertilizers, and the soil is so acidic that it now needs billions of shillings to actually do liming if we really need to go back there. So as a country, we are a mixture, we are a mishmash. So just out of curiosity, I'm thinking, what will be the general policy guidelines that would help universities also speak to where we are going? Because a lot of times the academia is doing catch up to the economy. Even as the society moves, and at least in this country, we are doing catch up. So we have got a research fund. We even have got laws in this country. If you're looking at the strategy paper on employment creation, we even proposed that counties will put 3% of their monies to research at county level. For as much as I've worked even in counties today, I've never seen a county that has set aside.
So the question is on the policy direction.
So the policy direction, so that then we move with the academia. It's okay, the place of the university is supposed to be a nursery of reason, so that then it democratizes your options as you go to the marketplace. But you see, we've now just turned it into a nursery of isms. We just come in. So literally, out of thought leadership, exactly. How do we try to ensure that the academia moves with where we are going? Looking at where we are going as a country, we are not bringing in guys here.
Let him answer before he forgets.
I want to anchor the point. I want to anchor the point because Eric here, the guys that standard here, will bring in a journalist
before he forgets the point. Arnold, okay.
I think that is very important point that she's brought up. How do we ensure? And that's why I talked about. There's a lot of research that is happening. If you look at how our universities are set up currently, with the debt load that vice chancellors are having, they cannot be able to motivate and even concentrate on their core mandate, which is teaching, research, and that is where the problem is. We have to lessen these burdens, the burden that they are having currently, by ensuring that the universities are running well. Then you can now challenge them to be able to give us the support that we require. Because the biggest challenge is that you will not expect a lecturer to give you what you are requesting, and yet their salary is being paid at 60%, because there are universities that are paying at 60%. So what we need to do is to ensure that that is done. Secondly, the National Research Council is being formed under the Presidential Working Party reforms. So that will be key for us in future as a country to ensure that the research that we are developing is also commercialized and is implemented. Just to follow through. These are discussions we can have another day.
Yeah.
And you can see there are many issues that are coming up in the education
Quite
sector.
a number.
Yes.
But Geoffrey, we thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
And we'll
Latif,
Ndu
Ndu,
and Arnold.
and Arnold.
But Arnold is my second name. My first name is Maliba. I don't know why you always forget that.
I like referring to you for second name basis. Geoffrey Monari is the CEO of the Universities Fund. He's been our guest this morning talking about the new universities funding model.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.